In November 2023, I received a package from a man I'd never met. Inside was a reel-to-reel tape from 1945 and a handwritten note that said, "My grandfather recorded this in Fordlândia before everyone disappeared. The government told us they abandoned the town, but this tape tells a different story. Please listen. Please investigate. The truth needs to come out." I'm a documentary filmmaker. I specialize in forgotten history, abandoned places, stories that fall through the cracks of official records. So I listened to the tape, and what I heard made me book a flight to the Amazon within 48 hours. Because the recording wasn't about people abandoning Fordlândia. It was about something being done to them, something that transformed them, something that might still be happening in the descendants of those workers 78 years later. My name is Ricardo Ferreira. I'm 52 years old. I've been making documentaries for 25 years. I've investigated corruption, environmental crimes, indigenous rights violations. I thought I'd seen the worst of what humans can do to each other. But Fordlândia showed me I was wrong. This is what I discovered in that abandoned American town in the heart of the Brazilian Amazon. This is the story the government has been hiding for nearly 80 years. This is the truth about why Fordlândia really failed. Fordlândia is one of the strangest episodes in industrial history. In 1928, Henry Ford, the American automobile magnate, purchased 2.5 million acres of rainforest along the Tapajós River in the state of Pará, Brazil. His goal was to create a rubber plantation that would supply his factories with the raw material for tires, breaking the British monopoly on rubber from Southeast Asia. But Ford didn't just want a plantation. He wanted to build an American town in the middle of the Amazon, a utopian community that would bring American values, American efficiency, and American civilization to the jungle. He built everything: houses, a hospital, schools, a church, a golf course, a movie theater, water towers, power plant. The architecture was pure Midwestern American. White clapboard houses with picket fences, wide streets on a grid pattern. It looked like a town from Michigan had been dropped into the rainforest. At its peak in the early 1930s, Fordlândia had a population of around 3,000. Most were Brazilian workers recruited from nearby towns and indigenous communities. They were paid American wages, which were extraordinary by Brazilian standards. They were given housing, healthcare, education for their children. In exchange, they had to follow Ford's rules: no alcohol, no tobacco, no traditional Brazilian food in the company cafeteria, only American meals like hamburgers and canned vegetables. Church attendance was encouraged. English classes were mandatory. Ford was trying to create not just a rubber plantation, but a social experiment. He believed American culture and work ethic could transform anyone, even people from what he considered primitive backgrounds. But it didn't work. The rubber trees died. Ford's engineers had planted them too close together, making them vulnerable to disease. The local leaf blight fungus devastated the plantation. Workers rebelled against the strict rules and foreign food. There were riots, strikes. In 1934, workers destroyed the cafeteria and ran American managers out of town. Ford tried again with a second site called Belterra, but that also failed. By 1945, Ford had invested the equivalent of $200 million in today's money and produced almost no rubber. The Brazilian government bought the land back for a fraction of that cost. The official story is that Fordlândia was abandoned gradually. Workers left to find jobs elsewhere. American staff returned to the United States. The town was left to the jungle. By the 1950s, it was a ghost town. Today, about 90 people live in Fordlândia, descendants of the original workers. The buildings are still there, slowly being consumed by vegetation. It's become a minor tourist attraction. Photographers love it. The ruins of American imperialism swallowed by the Amazon. I'd known about Fordlândia for years. I'd even considered making a documentary about it. But the story seemed straightforward. Arrogant American industrialist tries to impose his vision on the Amazon and fails. The jungle wins. Nothing mysterious, nothing hidden, till I received that package. The tape was in remarkably good condition given its age. I had it digitized by a specialist in São Paulo before I listened to it. The audio quality was poor, lots of static and degradation, but you could hear voices clearly. The recording began with a man speaking in Portuguese with a strong regional accent. This is Antonio Silva, radio operator for Fordlândia plantation, recording on November 3rd, 1945. I'm making this recording because I don't know if anyone will believe what's happening here. And if something happens to me, there needs to be a record. 3 weeks ago, the American staff left. All of them. Dr. Harrison, the chief medical officer, Mr. Patterson, the plantation manager, all the engineers and supervisors. They said the plantation was being shut down, that we should collect our final wages and leave. Most of the workers did leave, about 2,000 people. They took boats upriver to Santarém or downriver to other towns, but about 300 of us stayed. We had nowhere else to go. Our families were here, our homes. We thought we could keep the town running, keep the generator going, keep the hospital open, maybe grow our own food. We didn't know that the Americans had left something behind, something in the water system, something they'd been testing. There was a pause, static. Then Antonio continued. It started 2 weeks ago. People getting sick, fever, headaches, confusion. We thought it was malaria at first. But the symptoms were different. People would get better after a few days, but they'd change. They'd become quiet, compliant. They'd stop arguing, stop questioning. They'd just do whatever they were told. At first we thought it was exhaustion, resignation. But then we noticed physical changes. Their eyes. The pupils would dilate and stay dilated, even in bright sunlight. And they'd move differently, slower, more deliberate, like they were thinking about each movement before making it, more static. Dr. Silva, one of the Brazilian doctors who stayed, he started investigating. He examined the people who'd gotten sick. He found something, a parasite, in their blood. Under the microscope you could see them, tiny, thread-like, moving. He'd never seen anything like it. He checked the water supply, found the same parasites, millions of them, in the reservoir, in the pipes, in the water tower. Someone had introduced them deliberately. Dr. Silva found documents in the American hospital, hidden in a locked cabinet, research notes. The Americans had been developing this parasite for 3 years, since 1942. It was a project funded by the US military. The goal was to create a biological agent that would make populations compliant, pacified, easy to control. They tested it on animals first, then on some of the workers. Small doses mixed into their food or water. The results were promising. The parasite entered the bloodstream and migrated to the brain. It didn't kill, it altered behavior, made people suggestible, obedient, reduced aggression and independent thought. The recording continued. Antonio's voice was shaking now. The Americans were planning to use this in the war, to drop it in enemy water supplies, to make enemy soldiers surrender without fighting. But the war ended in September. The project was discontinued, and the Americans panicked. They had 300 workers here who'd been exposed to various stages of the parasite. Some were fully infected, some were carriers, some were controls who'd never been exposed. They couldn't bring these people back to the United States. Couldn't let them go to other Brazilian cities where the infection might spread, so they made a decision. They'd contaminate the entire remaining population, turn everyone into carriers, and then abandon the town, let the jungle take it. Let the infected die off naturally over the next decade or two. The parasite needed human hosts. Without new people coming to Fordlândia, it would eventually die out. Problem solved. But they didn't account for us staying. For 300 people deciding not to leave. Now we're all infected, everyone who drank the water in the last 3 weeks, including me. I can feel it. The changes. My thoughts are slower, simpler. I have to concentrate to feel angry or sad. Emotions are fading. But I'm still lucid enough to make this recording, to warn anyone who might come here, to explain what happened. Dr. Silva tried to treat people. He tried antibiotics, antiparasitics. Nothing worked. The parasite is too deeply integrated into the nervous system. Killing it would kill the host. We're stuck with it, and it's changing us. Some people are further along than others. There's a man named João who was one of the first to get sick. He barely speaks now. He just sits by the river all day, staring at the water. When you ask him questions, he answers, but there's nothing behind his eyes, no personality, no self. The parasite has hollowed him out. There was a long pause, filled with static. Then Antonio spoke again, his voice quieter. Dr. Silva killed himself yesterday. He left a note saying he couldn't bear to lose himself, that he'd rather die as himself than live as whatever the parasite turns us into. I understand. I've thought about it too. But I want to see what happens, how far the transformation goes, whether anything of us remains at the end. This might be the last time I can make a coherent recording. The parasite is spreading through my brain. I can feel my thoughts simplifying, my memories becoming distant, like they belong to someone else. In a few days or weeks, I'll be like João, empty, present but not present, a body without a person inside. If anyone finds this recording, please tell our families what happened to us. Tell them we didn't abandon Fordlândia. We were transformed. We became something else, and we're still here. In the ruins, in the jungle, waiting for nothing, feeling nothing, living but not alive. The recording ended. Just static. I sat in my apartment in São Paulo, listening to that static for a long time, trying to process what I'd heard. It could be a hoax, an elaborate fiction, but something about it felt real. The details, the medical terminology, the emotion in Antonio's voice. And the package had included a letter from his grandson explaining how he'd found the tape in his grandfather's belongings after he died. The grandson's name was Miguel Silva. He lived in Santarém, the nearest city to Fordlândia. He'd sent me his phone number. I called him. Miguel answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting. I asked him about the tape. He said his grandfather had died in 2019 at the age of 97. Among his possessions was a box of items from Fordlândia. The tape, some photographs, a journal. My grandfather never talked about Fordlândia, Miguel said. My whole life, if anyone mentioned it, he'd change the subject. He lived in Santarém from 1946 until he died. Normal life. He got married, had children, worked as a clerk, but he was different. My father always said there was something absent about him, like he was going through the motions of life without really experiencing it. No strong emotions, no passions, just existence. Did your father ever get tested for anything? Any hereditary conditions? No, why? The parasite your grandfather mentioned. If it was real, it might have been passed down. Parasites can sometimes be transmitted from parent to child. There was a long silence. My father died in 2005. He was 63. He drowned in the river. Just walked into the water one day and kept walking until it was over his head. People said it was suicide, but there was no note, no signs of depression. He just walked in and didn't come back out. My aunt, his sister, she died the same way in 2012. Just walked into the water. And my cousin in 2018. Same thing. We thought it was some kind of family curse, or mental illness running in the family. But now you're saying it might be a parasite. I don't know, I said, but I want to find out. I want to go to Fordlândia. I want to investigate. Be careful, Miguel said. My grandfather's journal, the entries from 1946 onward, they're strange. He wrote every day for 50 years, but the entries are almost identical, short, factual, no emotion, like this. Woke up, ate breakfast, went to work, came home, went to sleep. Every day, for 50 years. Whatever happened to him in Fordlândia, it took something from him, something he never got back. I spent 2 weeks preparing. I researched everything I could find about Fordlândia. I read academic papers about the plantation's failure. I looked for any mention of medical experiments or unusual illnesses. I found nothing official, but I did find some odd details in workers' testimonies collected by historians in the 1980s. Several former workers mentioned a hospital that was off-limits to most people. They called it the American hospital, as opposed to the regular clinic. Only certain workers were taken there, workers who'd gotten sick with mysterious illnesses. Some of those workers were never seen again. The official explanation was that they'd been sent to Belém for specialized treatment, but families never heard from them again. I also found a US military document from 1944, declassified in the 1990s, that referenced a Project Compliance being conducted at a remote facility in South America. The document was heavily redacted, but it confirmed that the US military had been researching biological agents for population control during World War II. I contacted a parasitologist at the University of São Paulo, Dr. Beatriz Almeida. I told her about the tape and asked if such a parasite could exist. She was skeptical but intrigued. There are parasites that affect behavior, she said. Toxoplasma gondii makes rats unafraid of cats. Ophiocordyceps makes ants climb to high places before dying. There are even parasites that can influence human behavior to some degree. But what you're describing, a parasite that could fundamentally alter personality and thought patterns while keeping the host alive for decades, that would be extraordinarily sophisticated. It would require the parasite to integrate into the central nervous system without causing fatal inflammation or immune response. Theoretically possible, but I've never seen anything like it documented. Could it be transmitted to children? Some parasites can cross the placental barrier. If this parasite lives in the bloodstream and brain, it's possible it could be transmitted during pregnancy or birth. The offspring would be born infected. They'd grow up with the parasite as part of their normal biology. Would they even know they were infected? Probably not. If they'd never known any other way of being, they'd think their mental state was normal. They might seem emotionally flat or passive to others, but they wouldn't have any reference point to know they were different. I asked Dr. Almeida if she'd be willing to come to Fordlândia with me, to take samples, to test the water and any remaining residents. She agreed. We flew to Santarém in early December 2023. From there, we hired a boat to take us up the Tapajós River to Fordlândia. The journey took about 8 hours. The river is wide and brown, surrounded by endless green forest. Beautiful and intimidating. As we approached Fordlândia, I could see the water tower first, rusted, rising above the trees. Then the buildings came into view, rows of identical white houses, now grey with age and mold. The grid of streets still visible despite vegetation growing through the pavement. We docked at a small pier. The town was eerily quiet. No sounds of people, just birds and insects and the river. We walked up the main street. Many of the houses were empty, their windows broken, roofs collapsed, but some were inhabited. We could see laundry hanging outside, smoke from cooking fires. A few people were visible in the distance. They watched us but didn't approach. We'd arranged to stay at the only guest house still operating. It was run by a woman named Dona Maria, one of the 90 or so people still living in Fordlândia. She was in her 70s. Born in Fordlândia in 1950, 5 years after the Americans left. She showed us to our rooms and offered us coffee. I asked her about the town's history, about what had happened in the 1940s. She was evasive. The Americans left. The plantation failed. People moved away, that's all. Did your parents ever talk about why they stayed? My parents are buried here. They lived their whole lives in Fordlândia. They liked it. It was peaceful. Were they healthy? Any unusual illnesses? She looked at me strangely. Why are you really here? You said you were making a documentary about Fordlândia's history, but you're asking about illnesses. I decided to be honest. I told her about the tape, about Antonio Silva's recording, about the parasite. Her expression didn't change, no surprise, no denial, just a flat acknowledgement. So someone finally told the story, she said. We wondered if anyone ever would. You know about it? Everyone here knows. The old ones who remember and those of us who were told. It's not a secret in Fordlândia. It's just not something we talk about with outsiders. Why not? Because what good would it do? The Americans are gone. The people it happened to are dead. And we're here, living, managing. Why bring attention to something that can't be changed? Can't be changed? You mean people here are still infected? She poured more coffee slowly, deliberately. Infected isn't the right word. We carry it. Those of us who were born here, whose parents or grandparents were part of the original population. We have the parasite. We've always had it. We don't know any other way of being. Have you ever been tested? Ever tried to get medical help? What would be the point? If the parasite can't be removed without killing the host, what would testing accomplish? We'd just be confirming what we already know, and then what? Become medical curiosities, lab specimens? No. We prefer to stay here, away from the world, living quietly. Dr. Almeida had been listening. Now she spoke. Dona Maria, I'm a scientist, a parasitologist. What you're describing is medically significant. This could help us understand how parasites interact with human neurology. It could lead to treatments for other conditions. Would you allow me to take a blood sample, just to confirm the parasite is real and study its characteristics? Dona Maria considered this. If I let you take samples, what do you do with the information? I publish findings in medical journals. I present at conferences. I try to understand the science. And the government, the media, do they get involved? That depends on what we find. If there's an ongoing health crisis, yes, authorities would need to be notified. Dona Maria shook her head. Then no. We don't want authorities here. We don't want media. We don't want the world knowing about us. We've been left alone for 78 years. We'd like to stay that way. But people are dying, I said. Miguel told me his family members have been drowning themselves, walking into the river. That's not normal. It's how we die, Dona Maria said simply. When the parasite reaches a certain stage, usually in late life, it compels the host to return to water. We don't know why. Maybe it's trying to complete a reproductive cycle. Maybe it's trying to spread to new hosts through the water. We just know that when someone reaches that stage, they walk into the river. We don't stop them. It's natural. It's how it ends. I couldn't accept that. You're talking about suicide driven by a parasite. That's not acceptable. That's not something to just accept as normal. For us it is, she said. We don't feel the way you do about death. The parasite dampens our emotional responses. We don't fear death. We don't grieve the way others do. When someone walks into the river, we acknowledge it. We move on. It's not traumatic for us. It's just the end of a cycle. Dr. Almeida and I exchanged looks. This was beyond anything we'd imagined. An entire community living with a parasite that had fundamentally altered their psychology, and they didn't see it as a problem. Over the next 3 days, we explored Fordlândia thoroughly. We documented the ruins, the hospital, the water tower, the church. All of it slowly being reclaimed by the jungle. We found the American hospital that Antonio had mentioned in his recording. It was separate from the main clinic, a 2-story building that had been thoroughly emptied. No equipment remained, no records. The Americans had cleaned it out before leaving, but in the basement we found something they'd missed. A small room with a heavy metal door. Inside were shelves lined with glass jars. Most were broken, but a few remained intact. They contained specimens preserved in formaldehyde, tissue samples, and in 2 of the jars we could see them, thread-like organisms suspended in the cloudy liquid. the parasites. Dr. Almeida carefully extracted one of the jars. "This is extraordinary," she whispered. "If these samples are still viable, we can study them, understand their structure, how they function." We also found documents, tucked behind a loose brick in the wall, water-damaged but partially legible. They confirmed what Antonio had said: Project Compliance, funded by the U.S. Army Chemical Corps, conducted between 1942 and 1945. The goal was to develop a biological agent that could reduce civilian resistance in occupied territories and create compliant labor forces in strategic industries. The parasite, designated Organism C7, had been engineered using a base organism found in the Amazon, some species of freshwater worm that naturally produced neurochemicals affecting fish behavior. Military scientists had modified it, enhanced its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier, increased its lifespan in human hosts. The documents described the testing phases. Phase 1 was animal testing, successful. Phase 2 was limited human testing. 12 volunteers from the Fordlândia workforce all showed expected behavioral changes within 3 weeks, reduced aggression, increased compliance, no serious side effects. Phase 3 was expanded testing, 100 subjects. This phase showed some complications. 3 subjects died from severe inflammation. 5 subjects showed extreme behavioral changes, becoming catatonic, but 82 subjects showed the desired response. The project was deemed successful. Phase 4 was to be mass dispersal testing, but the war ended before Phase 4 could be implemented. The final document was a memo dated October 15, 1945. It outlined the shutdown protocol. All American personnel are to evacuate Fordlândia by November 1, 1945. Prior to evacuation, Organism C7 is to be introduced into the main water supply at maximum concentration. All remaining workers are to be encouraged to stay and maintain the facility. Natural attrition will eliminate infected population over 20 to 30 years. Jungle environment will contain any spread. Site to be monitored remotely. No direct contact. Project files to be classified top secret. All physical evidence to be destroyed or removed. They'd done it deliberately. Infected everyone who stayed, and then left them to die slowly. I felt sick. Dr. Almeida was photographing every document. "This is a war crime," she said. "This is evidence of human experimentation without consent, of deliberate infection of civilian population. We need to report this." "To who?" I asked. "This happened 78 years ago. Everyone responsible is long dead. The American government will deny it or hide behind national security classifications. And the people here, the descendants of those workers, they don't want exposure. They don't want help. They just want to be left alone. But they're still infected, still dying. We can't just walk away. What's the alternative? Force them to accept treatment that might kill them, bring media and government here against their wishes, turn them into spectacles." Dr. Almeida didn't have an answer. That night, Donna Maria came to speak with us. She knew we'd found the hospital, found the documents. "You're going to tell the world, aren't you?" she said. "People deserve to know what happened here," I replied. "Why? So they can pity us? So they can study us? So they can try to cure us? We don't want to be cured. This is who we are. We've been living with the parasite for 3 generations. It's part of us now. Removing it would be like removing part of our brains. We'd be different people. Maybe we wouldn't be people at all. But you can't consent to having it if you've never known life without it," Dr. Almeida said. "How do you know you wouldn't prefer to be free of it?" "How do you know you wouldn't prefer to have it?" Donna Maria countered. "You feel fear, anger, sadness, anxiety, all these intense emotions that cause suffering. We don't. We're calm, content. We live simply. We don't fight. We don't accumulate. We don't destroy. Maybe we're better off." "You walk into rivers and drown yourselves," I said. "That's not better. We return to the water when it's time. That's different from your suicides. Your people kill themselves because they're desperate, because emotions overwhelm them. We return to the water because the parasite completes its cycle. It's biological, natural, not tragic. I spent a sleepless night thinking about what she'd said. In the morning, Dr. Almeida and I interviewed more residents, always with permission, always respectfully. We met about 40 of the 90 people living in Fordlândia. All of them were calm, polite, but emotionally flat. They answered questions in simple, direct ways. They showed no curiosity about the outside world, no interest in leaving, no complaints about their lives. It was eerie, like talking to people who were present but not quite there. We asked if anyone had ever left Fordlândia and tried to live elsewhere. Donna Maria said a few people had tried over the years. It never worked out. They can't adapt to the outside world, she explained. Too much stimulation, too much noise, too many emotions from other people. They get overwhelmed. Most come back within a few months. One man made it 5 years in Santarém before he couldn't take it anymore. He came back, said the outside world felt violent, chaotic. Here is peaceful. We collected blood samples from 10 volunteers, all tested positive for the parasite. Dr. Almeida examined the samples under a portable microscope. The organisms were indeed in their bloodstream, thread-like, moving, unlike any parasite in medical literature. This is going to rewrite parasitology textbooks, she said. The way it's integrated into their physiology without killing them. The way it's been passed down through generations. This is unprecedented. We also tested the water, the river, the old reservoir, the wells, all contaminated. The parasite was everywhere in Fordlândia's water system. Anyone who drank the water for an extended period would become infected. How is it that tourists who visit don't get infected? I asked. Tourists don't stay long enough, Donna Maria said. They come for a day. Take photos, leave. You need prolonged exposure, weeks of drinking the water. By then, the parasite has established itself in your bloodstream and migrated to your brain. If you leave before that happens, your immune system clears it out naturally. On our final day, Donna Maria took us to the cemetery. It was overgrown but still maintained, rows of simple crosses and markers. These are the original workers, she said. The ones who were here when the Americans left. Most died in the 50s and 60s. Natural causes officially, but really it was the parasite. As it matured in their systems, it caused complications. Some people it killed relatively quickly. Others it allowed to live for decades. She stopped at one grave. Antonio Silva, the man who made the recording you heard. He died in 1968. He was 53. He walked into the river just like he'd described in the tape, like he knew he would eventually. Did you know him? He was my father. I stared at her. Antonio Silva was your father. She nodded. I was born in 1950. He was still relatively functional then, still able to speak in complete sentences, still able to care for a family. But by the time I was 10, he'd changed. Come more like the others, quiet, distant. My mother said he used to be different before 1945. Used to laugh, tell jokes, get angry when things went wrong. But I never knew that version of him. I only knew the version the parasite made. Did he ever talk about the recording? About trying to warn people? No. By the time I was old enough to understand, he couldn't really talk about complex things anymore. He existed. That's all. When he died, I found the tape among his things. I listened to it once, heard him the way he used to be. It was strange, like hearing a stranger who happened to have my father's voice. Why didn't you ever share it? Try to get help? What help? He was already dead. We were already infected. The Americans were gone. The government didn't care about a failed plantation in the Amazon. Sharing the tape would only bring trouble. Attention we didn't want, so I kept it. And when I got old, I gave it to my son. And he gave it to his son, Miguel, who finally decided the story should be told. She looked at me. "So now you know everything. What will you do with it?" Dr. Almeida and I left Fordlândia the next morning. We took our samples, our photographs, our interviews. We had evidence of everything. Proof that the US military had conducted illegal human experiments on Brazilian civilians. Proof that a community of people had been living with an engineered parasite for 3 generations. Proof of a crime that had never been punished. We returned to São Paulo. Dr. Almeida began her analysis. I began editing my footage, and we both struggled with the same question: should we publish? Dr. Almeida's scientific findings were clear. The parasite was real, unprecedented. It had integrated into the host's nervous systems in ways never before documented. It was transmitted genetically. It fundamentally altered behavior and emotional responses. It eventually compelled hosts to drown themselves as part of what appeared to be a reproductive strategy. The parasite could theoretically be removed with aggressive antiparasitic treatment combined with immunosuppressants to prevent fatal inflammation. But the treatment would be risky, maybe 50% survival rate, and survivors would experience catastrophic personality changes as their brains adjusted to functioning without the parasite. They might not survive the psychological shock of suddenly having full emotional responses for the first time in their lives. In other words, curing the people of Fordlândia would likely kill half of them and psychologically destroy the rest. Dr. Almeida wanted to publish anyway. "The scientific community needs to know," she argued. "This could help us understand parasite-host relationships. It could lead to treatments for other neurological parasites. It could prevent something like this from ever happening again." "But what about the people of Fordlândia?" I asked. "What happens when your paper is published, when the media finds out, when the government gets involved?" "They get help, whether they want it or not, because they can't make informed decisions. The parasite has taken away their ability to feel strongly about anything, including their own well-being. We have to make the decision for them." That's exactly what the Americans said, that they knew what was best for these people, that they could make decisions for them without consent. We argued for weeks. In the end, we compromised. Dr. Almeida published her findings in a medical journal, but she anonymized the location. She called it an isolated community in South America. She didn't mention Fordlândia by name. She didn't include identifying details. The paper caused a sensation in parasitology circles. Researchers wanted to know where these samples came from. They wanted to study the community. Dr. Almeida refused to provide specifics. She cited ethical concerns, patient privacy, the community's right to autonomy. Some researchers accused her of fabricating the findings. Others praised her ethical stance. The debate continues. As for me, I made the documentary. I included everything: the history of Fordlândia, the tape recording, the investigation, the discoveries, the interviews with residents. Everything except the exact location and current names of people living there. I changed names, I obscured identifying details, I made it clear this was a real place with real people, but I didn't make it easy for anyone to find them. The documentary was released in May 2024. It premiered at a festival in Rio. It got some attention. Some film critics praised it. Some ethicists criticized my decision not to fully expose the location and force intervention. Some conspiracy theorists said it was all fake. The US government declined to comment. The Brazilian government issued a statement saying they were looking into the matter, but nothing has come of it. Fordlândia remains where it's always been, in the Amazon, isolated, quiet, home to 90 people living with a parasite that's been part of them for 3 generations. I've thought a lot about whether I made the right decision, whether I should have exposed them completely, whether I should have demanded intervention, whether the people of Fordlândia have the right to continue living as they are, or whether we have an obligation to cure them even against their wishes. I don't have answers. What I do know is that Antonio Silva made that recording in 1945 because he wanted the truth to be known. He wanted someone to understand what happened, what was done to him and his community. I've honored that. I've told the story. Whether anyone believes it is out of my control. Last month I received another package from Miguel Silva. Inside was his grandfather's journal, the one he'd mentioned. 50 years of daily entries. I've been reading it slowly, and Miguel was right. The entries are almost identical. 50 years of woke up, ate, worked, slept. No variation, no emotion, no personality, just existence documented. But there's one entry that's different. Just one. From December 25th, 1945. 7 weeks after Antonio made the recording, the entry says, "Today I forgot my daughter's name, just for a moment. I looked at her and couldn't remember. Then it came back. But I know it's starting. The forgetting, the emptying. Soon I'll forget everything, who I was, who I loved, what I cared about. The parasite is taking it all, and I can't stop it. I don't even feel afraid anymore. That's how I know it's working. Because I should be terrified, but I'm not. I'm just tired. And I think that when it's done, when I'm finally empty, it will be a relief. To not have to carry memories, to not have to feel, to just be. Maybe that's what the Americans wanted all along. Not workers who obey, but workers who don't feel enough to want anything else but what they were. Workers who accept, workers who don't dream, workers who exist without desiring. And in that, they succeeded. They turned us into exactly what they wanted. Perfect laborers who ask for nothing because we can't imagine wanting anything. I wonder if anyone will ever read this. If anyone will understand what was taken from us. Not our lives. We're still alive. But ourselves, our souls, if such things exist. We're still here, but we're not here. And I don't know which is worse, being dead or being alive but hollow. That was the last unique entry. After that, back to the mechanical documentation of empty days. I keep the journal on my desk. I look at it often. Reminder of what I found in Fordlândia. Reminder of what humans are capable of doing to other humans in the name of progress, in the name of science, in the name of national security. The people of Fordlândia aren't the first victims of unethical experimentation. They won't be the last, but they might be unique in one way. They're the only victims I know of who've made peace with what was done to them, who've accepted it so completely they don't even see themselves as victims. And maybe that's the most disturbing thing of all, not the parasite itself, but what it took from them. The ability to be angry about what was done, the ability to want justice, the ability to feel violated. The parasite didn't just change their behavior, it changed their capacity to care that their behavior had been changed. It robbed them of the ability to mourn their own loss. That's the true horror of Fordlândia. Not that people were infected, but that the infection made them incapable of understanding what they'd lost. They can't grieve for their own stolen humanity because the parasite took away the part of them that would know something was stolen. They're prisoners who don't know they're in a prison, victims who can't comprehend their victims. And because of that, they can't be saved, because salvation requires wanting to be saved, and they don't want anything at all. I went back to Fordlândia 2 months ago. I didn't tell Dr. Almeida, I didn't tell anyone. I just needed to see it again, to talk to Dona Maria, to understand if I'd made the right choice by protecting their anonymity. She was still there, still calm, still flat in affect. We sat on her porch and drank coffee, and I asked her the question that had been haunting me. Do you ever wish you were different? Do you ever wonder what it would be like to feel things strongly? She thought about it for a long time, not because she was struggling to articulate, but because thinking itself seemed to require effort for her. Finally, she said, I don't think I can wish for something I don't understand. You describe emotions, strong feelings, passion, love, grief, but I don't really know what those words mean. Not experientially. I know the definitions, but I don't feel them. So how can I wish for them? It would be like wishing to have a sense I've never possessed, like wishing for echolocation, I don't miss what I've never had. But your father had it. Before the parasite fully took hold. He could feel. He could want. He could love. Don't you wish you could have known that version of him? I suppose. But I don't feel the wish strongly. It's an intellectual recognition that something was lost, not an emotional longing for what could have been. I understand that other people would feel sad about this, but I don't, and I can't make myself feel what I don't feel. Doesn't that bother you? That you can't feel bothered? She smiled slightly. It was the first time I'd seen her smile. You're asking if I'm disturbed by not being disturbed. I understand the paradox. But no, it doesn't bother me. Nothing bothers me. That's the point. That's what the parasite does. It removes bother, removes disturbance, removes suffering. Yes, it also removes joy. But from my perspective, the trade seems fair. We don't suffer. Isn't that worth something? I didn't know how to answer that. Maybe she was right. Maybe a life without suffering is worth a life without joy. Maybe the people of Fordlândia are better off than we are. Or maybe that's exactly what the parasite wants me to think. Maybe it's already affecting me. Maybe just being in Fordlândia, drinking the water, breathing the air, I've been exposed. Maybe even now, thread-like organisms are working their way through my bloodstream toward my brain. Maybe in a few weeks, I'll start to feel calmer, less reactive, less concerned about the ethical questions that torment me. Maybe that would be a relief. I've been tested. Dr. Almeida drew my blood when I returned. No parasites. I'm clean. But I think about it, more than I should. I think about what it would be like to not feel anxiety about my work, about money, about the state of the world, to just exist without the constant background noise of worry and want. Sometimes it sounds appealing. Sometimes I understand why the people of Fordlândia don't want to be cured, because cure means feeling again, and feeling is hard, feeling hurts. Maybe numbness is easier, maybe emptiness is lighter than the weight of a full emotional life. But then I think about Antonio Silva, about his last authentic entry in the journal, about how he knew what was being taken from him and couldn't stop it, about how he recorded that tape to warn others, to make sure someone knew, to ensure that what happened in Fordlândia wouldn't be forgotten or dismissed. He fought the parasite even as it consumed him. He used his last moments of lucidity to tell the truth. That has to mean something. That has to be worth something, even if the people he was trying to protect don't care. Even if his own daughter can't feel gratitude for his effort, even if 90 years later the world barely notices. He tried, he resisted, he documented, and because of that, I know, you know. Anyone who hears this story knows. The truth is preserved. The crime is recorded. That's not nothing. That's defiance. That's humanity refusing to be quietly erased. That's the part of us the parasite couldn't take. The need to be witnessed, to be remembered, to matter. Antonio Silva mattered. The 3,000 workers of Fordlândia mattered. The 90 people still living there matter. They're not just data points, not just victims, not just hosts for a parasitic organism. They're people. They were people. Even if the parasite has taken away their ability to assert their own personhood, I'll assert it for them. That's what this documentary is. That's what this story is. An assertion that what happened in Fordlândia was wrong. That the people who did it should be held accountable even if they're dead. That the victims deserve to be remembered even if they can't remember themselves. I don't know what happens next. Maybe the Brazilian government will eventually investigate. Maybe they won't. Maybe researchers will find Fordlândia despite my efforts to obscure its location. Maybe they won't. Maybe someone will develop a cure for the parasite. Maybe they won't. What I do know is that right now, today, 90 people are living in a ruined American town in the Amazon rainforest. They wake up, they eat, they exist, and eventually, one by one, they walk into the river. They don't feel sad about it. They don't feel scared. They just walk into the water and keep walking until they can't walk anymore, until the river takes them, until the cycle completes. And the jungle doesn't care, the river doesn't care, the ruins don't care. The forest reclaims everything eventually, buildings, bodies, memories. All of it returns to the earth, all of it disappears. In 100 years, maybe 200, Fordlândia will be completely gone. The last infected person will have walked into the river. The buildings will have collapsed. The jungle will have erased every trace of the American experiment. The parasite will die with its final host, and no one will remember. Unless we remember, unless we tell the story, unless we bear witness to what happened in that forgotten town in the Amazon. That's why I made this documentary. Not to save anyone, not to cure anyone, not to get justice, but to remember, to document, to ensure that Fordlândia doesn't disappear completely, that Antonio Silva's voice doesn't fade into static and silence, that 3,000 workers who came to the Amazon seeking work and ended up as experimental subjects aren't forgotten. They were here, they lived, they suffered. They were transformed against their will, and even if they can't feel angry about it anymore, I can feel angry for them. Even if they can't grieve what was taken, I can grieve for them. Even if they've accepted their fate, I can refuse to accept it. That's what humanity is, not the absence of suffering, but the refusal to let suffering be meaningless. The insistence on witnessing, on remembering, on saying, this happened, this was wrong. These people mattered, and we will not let them be forgotten. My name is Ricardo Ferreira. I'm 52 years old. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I found the last broadcast from Fordlândia, the recording that Antonio Silva made in 1945 before the parasite took his voice, his personality, his self. I found it. I listened to it. I investigated it. And I'm sharing it with you now, not because I have solutions, not because I can undo what was done, but because silence is complicity, forgetting is erasure. And the people of Fordlândia deserve better than silence and erasure. They deserve to be known, to be seen, to be remembered, even if they can no longer remember themselves. This is their story. This is Antonio Silva's warning. This is the truth about Fordlândia. And now it's yours to carry, yours to remember, yours to ensure doesn't disappear into the jungle like everything else Henry Ford left behind. The buildings will crumble, the water tower will fall, the church will collapse, the cemetery will be overgrown. But this story remains, this testimony survives, this truth endures, because we choose to remember, because we refuse to forget, because some stories are too important to let die. Fordlândia is one of them. Remember it. Remember them. Remember Antonio Silva and his 3,000 neighbors who came to the Amazon seeking work and found something far worse. They're still there, in the ruins, by the river, living but not living, present but absent, waiting for nothing, feeling nothing, existing without existing. And when the last one walks into the water, when the final host completes the cycle, when Fordlândia finally dies completely, at least this will remain, this story, this testimony, this witness, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all we can offer the dead, the promise that they'll be remembered, the assurance that what happened to them mattered, the guarantee that their suffering wasn't invisible, wasn't ignored, wasn't forgotten. I hope it's enough. I hope Antonio Silva, wherever his consciousness went when the parasite finally consumed it, somehow knows that his recording reached someone, that someone listened, that someone came, that someone told the truth, that someone remembered. I hope it brings him peace, even though I know he can no longer feel peace or anything else. I hope it matters, even though I know he can no longer understand mattering. I hope. Because that's what those of us outside Fordlândia still have. The capacity to hope, the ability to care, the burden of feeling, and maybe that burden is exactly what makes us human, what separates us from the empty hosts walking through those ruined streets. We feel, we care, we remember, and we refuse to let forgetting win. That's the final message of Fordlândia. Not a warning about parasites or experiments or unethical science, but a reminder that humanity isn't in the body. It's in the caring, in the feeling, in the remembering, in the refusal to accept that people can be erased. The people of Fordlândia have lost that, but we haven't. And as long as we remember them, as long as we tell their story, as long as we refuse to let them disappear, they're not completely gone. Part of them survives. In this recording, in this testimony, in your memory now. Carry it forward, tell others, keep the story alive, because that's all we can do for the dead. Remember them. Honor them. Ensure their suffering wasn't for nothing. Fordlândia still stands, for now, but someday it won't. Someday the jungle will take it all, but this story will remain, as long as we keep telling it, as long as we refuse to forget. Thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing. Thank you for remembering. Antonio Silva's broadcast has reached its destination. After 78 years, it's been heard, it's been understood, it's been shared. And now it's yours. Guard it well. Remember Fordlândia. Remember the people the parasite took. Remember that humanity is fragile, that it can be stolen, that it can be erased. But also remember that stories survive, that truth endures, that witnesses matter, and that as long as we remember, they're not entirely gone. They remain in memory, in testimony, in truth. Forever.